First of all, by way of introduction, to let you know, I'm a realtor just like all of you. I've been licensed since 1987, and I sold real estate all up until 10 years ago. Today, I run a national nonprofit educational program for realtors, and I travel the country doing this. I go to Wisconsin, where it's really cold, and I'm very happy to be in my home state of New Jersey. My program is nonprofit. It's paid for by a grant. And the beauty of this program is that it's purely education for you guys. I'm not here to sell you anything. I'm not here to ask for anything in return. There's no hidden agenda. I'm here just to educate you on overcoming obstacles selling oil-heated properties. How many of us heat our homes with oil? That's why I have a job. You do. Great.
No, I have a listing with the oil.
You have a listing with oil, even better. How many of us have shown an oil-heated home? Yeah, more of us have, that's right. So that's why I have a job. Now, I am not here to tell you, I'm not here to say, oil heat is God's gift to everybody. That's not the purpose of this today. I'm here to tell you the benefits of oil heat, to help you feel more confident showing oil-heated properties and representing oil-heated listings. But most important, I'm here so that when you get an oil-heated listing, you can feel more confident. You can feel like you can give the facts to a buyer and let them make an educated decision. So that's basically what this is about. Let's hit it head on with the biggest objection to oil heat.
Expense?
Oh, let's do that one. Expensive? That it's expensive? Okay, a lot of people have this conception that oil heat is expensive, and that's why they don't want to heat their homes with oil. The first thing they think of is that big truck that pulls up, right? They think that when that truck pulls up, you have to write a check for $750. And who has that kind of money lying around? So that's a big fear that people have. First of all, those days are in the past. When the truck pulls up, you don't have to write a check. I mean, if you want to, you can. They give you a discount if you write a check when the truck pulls up. But in the dealers today, they have programs that they make available to families. For example, there are budget plans where you can pay the same amount every month. So
Like gas.
very similar to the way the utilities work.
Right.
The budget plan. You can pre-buy it. If you see that the price is really, really low and you don't need the oil yet, you already have a tank.
August purchase.
You can make an August purchase, exactly. You can do that, so that's another way. One of the most revolutionary ways to pay for oil is a way that not everyone is aware of, and not every company offers this, so you have to shop around. But some oil dealers, some of the larger ones, subscribe to a payment program called PayGo. PayGo, pay as you go, PayGo. And you would want to Google PayGo to see which dealers offer that. And the way PayGo works, you call them up and you say, I want to go on the PayGo plan. And so they set a date to come out and fill your tank. And you can tell them when you're ready. And whatever the price ticket is on that day, whatever it costs for oil on the day they come out to fill is how much you're going to pay for that tank of oil. But no money is exchanged that first day. What happens is they put a monitor on your tank. And then the monitor works with satellite and sends a signal back to the office. And they will then be able to monitor on a month-to-month basis how much oil has been used in that tank. And they will send out an invoice to you at the end of the month for however many gallons were used at whatever that price ticket was. And it is molded after the utilities. It's meant to work like the utilities because utilities.
Not what you get, what you use.
It's not what you get, it's what you use. And you don't have to pay for 6 months from now or 4 months from now. You pay for what you use today, and you don't have to pay for all that other oil until you use it. So it's like there's a contract, and it's like they're lending you the oil. They're putting it in your tank temporarily until you use it, and you only pay for what you use when you use it. So, that takes care of that fear that people have They think that big truck always shows up at Christmas.
Well, when I lived north and we always everybody had oil heat.
Right.
And in answer to my own question, it is the most efficient
There you go.
type of heat,
There you
as
go.
far as heat for the dollar.
That's very true. And a lot of people make the mistake of comparing it apples to apples for the cost, but it's not apples to apples. It's a much warmer heat.
Yeah.
And also, you know, people think that it's expensive because there is a very strong memory that we all have of July 2008. And we remember that when heating oil prices were sky high and people couldn't afford to heat their homes. But we also remember that because there's a correlation between heating oil and gasoline at the pumps. They all work together. And people remember back in July of 2008 how expensive it was to put gas in your car. Especially if you drove an SUV, it was costing you $100 to fill that up at the pumps. And so, but what we don't remember, we just remember that period that was so expensive, but what we don't remember is that within about 3 months it corrected itself and it went back to a new normal. And it's market driven, so it'll never be flat steady. It'll be up and down and up and down, but it's been closer in its up and down since then. And oil heat, what you need to know is that it is not only market driven, but it's also cyclical in nature. Just like if you've been in real estate as long as I have, I've seen good real estate markets and I've seen bad real estate markets. And during the tough real estate markets, those of us that are in it for the long run, we don't panic because we know that it will come back around. It always corrects itself. Well, with oil heat, you're going to remember this. If you think back to the last major crisis before July of 2008, jump right back to the 70s and the odd even days. Right? You remember? We had odd even days. I know I got my license back then. We're dating ourselves. I had my driver's license. I remember my brother used to change out the license plates on the cars to cheat the system and fill his tank when he wanted to. But odd even days. So you go from the 1970s up to 2008. And here we are in 2000. I move around a lot, I know. Sorry, that's just, I can't sit still. They tell me don't drink coffee. So here we are in 2018, and we're in a really good place in the cycle of heating oil. And according to Forbes, consider today's prices the ceiling. And they're predicted to only get better from here over the next 3 to 5 years. So if a buyer says to you, I love the house, it's perfect, but heating oil is so expensive, I don't want to do that. You know what? You won't remember this. Call me. On my business card is my cell phone. And what I want to also just mention to all of you, because I'm a realtor like you, I have the same work ethic that you have. If you can just pass these down. I have the same work ethic that you have. I
You
know.
don't sleep?
Well, we don't sleep.
No sleep?
Your challenges don't happen Monday through Friday, 9 to 5. That's when we do classes. Your challenges happen at night. Your challenges happen when you've already written contracts and both parties have received copies of their contracts, and you get the phone call from the young buyer saying, you know, I was just talking to my best friend's next door neighbor's cousin, and they said that we shouldn't buy this house because of the oil heat. That's when you need me. And that's when I invite you to text me and say, Susan, are you awake? And if I'm awake, I'll help you. Yes?
Susan, aren't there some environmental issues with oil heat? Like some cities or towns won't even let you put a tank in the ground with oil?
Not correct. Not correct.
That was my question.
There is no law in the state of New Jersey that says you are not permitted to have an active, non-leaking underground tank. Perfectly legal. There are some municipalities that are asking for it to be removed at the site of transaction. And so that overrides the state law. but there is no law that says you can't have it.
Cause like if some people convert to gas or something like that, that they tell them, well, then you have to get that tank.
Well, you must.
Like,
You
well,
can't leave
get it out
a
of the ground.
non-working. You can't just leave a tank with oil in the ground. If you're not currently using that tank to heat the home, then yes, it is mandated that you have that taken
Have to
care
have it
of.
removed, yeah.
Now, there's two ways to do it. You can either remove it or have it abandoned. And used to be 10, 15 years ago, abandonment was the way we did it with all of them.
Yeah.
That's where you take the oil out and then you fill it with an
Sand.
inert material like a foam or sand, and then you keep it buried. That's how we used to do it. But what the attorneys are saying today is, I don't want that. I want even if it's been abandoned, properly decommissioned, I want it out of the ground, because the attorneys today are overriding the laws. The attorneys today are saying, I will not permit my client to take on the liability of an underground tank. Active, non-active, leaking,
If it's there.
non-leaking. If it's there, I want it out. And so as a realtor to realtor, it's much harder to sell a property with an active, non-leaking underground oil tank. Therefore, when you are about to take a listing, it's best to have that conversation head on, before even listing the property. Let's be honest with each other. If we are going up to preview a property, and as we're walking up the path, we look up and the roof is lifting, and we see the shingles are lifting. Well, the first thing we do when we walk in that house is we're already looking up, right? We're looking up for signs of leaks. And we have no compunction about saying to Mr. and Mrs. Homeowner, that roof is at the end of its economical life. And any buyer who comes into this house is going to automatically reprice your house based on the age of that roof. We have no compunction about talking about that because we can see it. We need to have the same conversation about the underground tank, because the problem is when they put those tanks in the ground back in the day, they never had a plan B. They put it in the ground, and then it became their kids' problems. Then it became the next generation. Yes,
I'm sorry, I came in a little late. Obviously, you're talking about underground oil tanks.
correct.
How is that handled with bank-owned properties?
Very good question. Now, the banks and their attorneys say, not my problem,
Okay,
deal with it. So, that's a real challenge. So when you'll be working with a buyer, if you're representing a property with a bank and they're saying not my problem, then they're just gonna lose a lot of money on the property, because no buyer is gonna go ahead and pay full price or pay close to full price for a property. How are you? It's good to see you with a class. Last time I was here, there was no class.
Aw, I'm sorry to hear that.
Yeah.
So, and as far as a buyer is concerned, there are a few things you can do. I'm going to jump off the topic and address that right now. As far as a buyer, if you represent a buyer and they're about to consider purchasing a bank-owned property that has an underground tank, there are tank tests that they can do. There are three types of tests. There is the pressure test, and that is where they exert pressure into the tank, and then they have a microphone listening for pinholes, for whistles. There is the vacuum test, and that is where they suck the air out of the tank. And again, they're listening for air whistles. Both of those tests are very dangerous tests. If you're going to have a test like that done, I recommend first you reach out to your local oil dealer and say, if it was your daughter that was thinking of buying this house, who would you recommend to test the tank? Because you want to make sure you have a really reputable person performing those kinds of tests. If it's their first time out, you don't want to run the risk. What happens when you put too much air in a balloon? Right, you don't want to.
Those tanks are rusted enough.
They're already compromised, so you want to be very careful. A really safe test is the electronic probe. And that is where they drop an electronic probe. It's non-intrusive. They just drop it into the tank. And it works the same as deep sea fishing, where they're listening for sonar sonic, what is it called? Sonic waves, for those, like deep sea fishing. And if they pick up a sonic wave, a sound, that means that there's a leak. That means there's a hole in there. But that test will not create any challenges. There is also another test, is a soil test, where if you know there's a tank there, they can test the soil down by the tank. But for your buyers, there's no guarantee that even with these tests that it's okay to go. These tanks really need to come out of the ground. But here's a little peace of mind for your buyer in that particular circumstance. If your buyer feels comfortable after having those tests done to move forward and purchase that property with that underground tank, as long as the property is owner occupied, as long as it is their primary residence, the state of New Jersey still has funding available. This is really important. You want to listen to this. This is right for you, and you're walking away.
I'm listening to you, I'm trying to get Ken to sign in.
I'll wait till
Nobody
you're
knows more
done.
about oil tanks than I do, sweetie. I have had them on my properties.
Yeah.
And I have them remediated, so
Yeah, well,
you keep preaching to the choir.
Okay, then I won't even go there. But did you know that the state of New Jersey will pay up to $500,000 for remediation reimbursement in the event of a tank leak?
Is it hard to get it?
The qualifications are as long as your income, your combined taxable income, is less than $200,000 a year, $250,000 a year, as long as your net worth is less than $500,000 minus your primary residence, minus your pension, minus your 401k. So as long as the house isn't $1 million house, as long as the house can be $1 million house, and you can still qualify for the remediation reimbursement. The only way you'd get kicked out, number one, is if it's not your primary residence. So a bank-owned property would not work, and also an estate sale would not work.
do you have to be in a time frame? Do you have to live in the house a time frame before?
No, you just have to have title to it and live in the house. You have to own the house. So the money is something that's very, it's not well known. It's one of the best kept secrets out there.
Yeah.
Now, it takes about 5 years to get that money. There's a long pile, there's a big pile waiting to be reimbursed. So if somebody does have a leak, it's recommended that they address it immediately. And as soon as they get that no further action letter, that they apply for the state grant for the remediation reimbursement. Once it's received in the state, it will be time-stamped and dated, and then it goes on the pile, and as money becomes available, it will be paid back. The state is receiving up to $12 million a year for remediation reimbursement. So if the pile is this big, and the first $12 million goes to this, next year this bunch will get it, and the following year this bunch will get it. So it could take up to 5 years to get that money. So that's really important to know. Another really important fact that you need to keep in mind, if there is a leak, if you get a call from your client, oh my God, they discovered a leak, first thing they do is when they hire a company for remediation, it's new in New Jersey, it's actually pretty brand new, but make sure they hire a company that has a geologist on staff, because the geologist has the authorization to write the no further letter action. And whenever you see these properties, when you think of a house with a leak, you think of the piles of dirt on the lawn for 8 months at a time, a year, and the house can't be sold. Nothing can be done with that property until they get that no further action letter. The only reason that dirt is sitting there for so long is because of the waiting list in Trenton for people to write the no further action letter. Bureaucracy is what's getting in the way of that no further action letter. If you hire a remediation company that has a geologist on staff, as soon as that remediation work is complete, then the geologist can then just write that no further action letter, and the house is free, it's clear. It's free to be sold, and they're free to move on.
What does that do with the city? Because the city has to do their own inspections.
Well, the DEP is involved, but it's the writing of the no further action letter that takes the months and months and months. And so when they get that letter, they can have that final inspection with that letter. So it'll save so much time, tremendous amount of time. Good, does that help?
Yeah.
It's good information. Okay, so we talked about price. We talked about tanks, above ground tanks. The new tanks are double walled. Have you ever seen a new tank? One of the new tanks? The new tanks,
They're
it's
plastic.
inside. They're made with Tupperware.
Yeah.
Tupperware doesn't leak. So they're made with Tupperware inside, and outside is a corrosive resistant steel. And they almost look like a central air conditioning unit. They're like this. They're not bulbous. They're not round. They're not torpedoes. They're just a very simple stainless steel looking. It almost looks like an olive oil canister. It's built very similar to that. And if you want to put it outside, they have enclosures, tank enclosures that you can put it in, that so that it looks like pool equipment or for your summer lawn chairs and whatnot. There are even companies who will customize one of those tank enclosures to conform to the styling of the house. So if you have a beautiful Tudor or a colonial and you don't want just a shed up against the house, you can have it custom made to go with the style of the house. So that's very nice. And also another thing to know is that if you have a funky basement, you want to put it in the basement or the utility room and it's kind of an odd shape, they can customize these tanks to fit an odd shape. So it can be made to fit your house as well. If you have a higher end client, a little more money, one of the higher properties, you can purchase a double walled tank that will alarm to the burglar alarm system. And if there is a manufacturing defect in the Tupperware section, and if it does begin to leak, if there's a compromise, the alarm will go off and tell you, so that you can bring someone in immediately to take care of it, and it will leak into itself. So it's self-contained, so that the fear of having the oil on the ground is gone because it's double-walled, and it's designed as a preventative measure because manufacturing defects happen in all walks of life. So if that does become a problem, that problem is resolved. So, some other objections that people have about oil, everybody has memories. We remember going to our, sorry about moving on. We remember going to our grandmother's house with the old radiators. And we remember you walked into grandma's house and it smelled like two things. It smelled like apple pie or cookies and oil heat. Because everybody remembers those older homes. You walked in the door and it hit you in the face. And we've probably even walked into some listings where you've smelled oil. And that's a big turnoff to people. The truth of the matter is, you should never smell oil. If you walk into a house and you smell oil, that's an early warning indicator. That's telling you there's a problem with the system, that something needs to be addressed with the system. Either something needs to be tightened, or something's broken, or a filter needs to be changed. And that's really good. See, that's a positive, because oil heat will never be called the silent killer, because you'll always get an early warning of odor in the air that something needs to be handled. So you can turn that around. And if you're ever working with a client and you have a couple of oil-heated properties on your agenda to show them, if you walk into a house together and you smell oil, a really good thing to do is to pick up your cell phone and say, "Excuse me," call the listing agent and say, the homeowner may not even realize because they're so used to it, but I can smell an odor of oil and they need to have someone in to service their furnace. And that makes a great demonstration for your buyer so they can see it's a positive. And so they're not turned off by oil heat now and forever. So you can turn things around. Another thing, have we ever had the most perfect listing, pristine and pretty, and the homeowner just did everything right? We can tell the difference when a listing is slapped together for resale right? When the homeowner painted it, paints on the window, you know the difference. Or when they really care about their home and they live like that. So you have the most perfect listing and you have the young millennial come in, the couple, and they love the house and you feel it. And you know it because you don't have to say a word when you get the goosebumps. When they're already talking furniture, that's when we go quiet because we don't want to talk them out of anything. Let them talk themselves into it. Then we go downstairs into the basement and there's a giant monster in the basement still heating the house. Have you ever seen them?
Yeah.
Some of them are covered with asbestos. Some are even old converted coal burners from back, around the 1900s.
Wow.
Ridiculous. And these things are still heating some of these homes because Mr. and Mrs. Homeowner says, it works. It's not broke. Why fix it?
They used to call them the octopi,
Yes, they did.
the old octopi.
That's exactly correct. And it's really hard to sell that to a buyer, especially a young millennial. Hard to sell that system to a buyer. And that can be the deal breaker, no matter how nice the house is, even if it's in the school system they wanted and it's, fenced in yard and it's everything they wanted. But you walk in and you see that thing in the basement and that's tough. Well, here's how we turn it around, and I have a solution for you. First thing is, we tell them why it's in the basement, why it's still heating the house. Because those things were built so darn well back in the day. They were built like military tanks, and they will never die. With a part here and there and a tweak here and there, those old octopi will outlast our grandchildren. They will heat this home ad infinitum. But here's what I recommend we do. Let's bring in a specialist to take a look at the system so we don't panic and we don't make a decision based on what we see. Let's make a decision based on an expert. Now let's face it, home inspectors know a little bit about everything, but they don't know a lot about some things, right? And if a home inspector gets their hands on this listing and they take a look at that system, poor, automatic poor, automatic needs to be replaced, automatic end of economic life, it's going to scare the hell out of your buyers. And it's got $, $$ written all over it. That can be the deal buster right there. But here's what I recommend. Before the home inspector gets there, before you go to home inspection, maybe even before you write the contract, say, Mr. and Mrs. Homeowner, may I bring in an oil heat specialist? Call your local oil dealer. They will be delighted to help you. There will be no charge. They will come out. They'll meet your buyer. They'll meet you. They'll take a look at that old clunker in the basement and analyze it. And the first thing they're going to take a look at